am an eternal flame, baby!
Greg, Steven, and Garnet are heading off to the Keystone State, but Garnet does not tag along just to have fun with Steven and his dad. Garnet is having a very hard time keeping her fusion together. Not only is she shaken up from the events in keeping it together, but now Pearl has betrayed her trust, and Ruby and Sapphire, who make up Garnet, are having a very hard time settling their differences in how to go about Pearl's behavior. Apparently Garnet doesn't want to break her fusion around the other gems. Maybe Ruby will be even more mad with Pearl in the vicinity, and it could just further exasperate the situation, so when Garnet sees a way out with Steven and his dad, she takes it. And of course, shortly into the motel, the two do split up. Ruby is piping hot. Ruby is searing the ground with her anger, where Sapphire is cool, calm, and collected, and is literally freezing things around her. These are really nice visual metaphors, fire and ice, and it's the fire and ice that fuses together to make the perfect, complete Garnet. Which, by the way, everybody said Garnet wasn't a perfect fusion because of the whole 3 eyes thing. Well, it turns out that Sapphire actually is a Cyclops. So the 3rd eye makes sense in terms of them combining, so really Garnet doesn't have any flaws that we've seen thus far in her fusion in terms of gaining additional eyes or limbs that shouldn't belong. No, she seems like the perfect form, the perfect embodiment of the love between Ruby and Sapphire. So this episode is primarily about the conflict between Ruby and Sapphire. Sapphire has seen that in the future, Pearl will be forgiven and all this will be resolved, so she takes an approach that's above this all, as she levitates onto the bed, and she just says that Ruby should more or less get over it. Ruby, on the other hand, is incredibly angry and just wants to vent non-stop and complain about Pearl, but it's not helping that Sapphire is very cold and very almost snarky in regards to Ruby's behavior, and is just making it worse. Sapphire is basically fueling Ruby's flames, which I find a bit weird because with future vision, Sapphire should be able to determine the quickest route to resolving this whole thing. But Sapphire does not seem to care. Sapphire never realizes that many of her snide comments just further make Ruby angry, and Ruby's anger is transferred from Pearl to now Sapphire, and they're having a fight between each other. Future Vision should easily be able to solve this because it seems like no matter which route you take, Ruby will be angry at such comments. I don't understand why Sapphire continues to make these kind of snarky, snide, above-it-all remarks towards Ruby. It is not speeding up the situation, and I would think speeding up this whole conflict thing and, getting to the resolution of it would be ideal. This is another case where I think Future Vision was poorly implemented into the plot. What's awesome is that Greg knows about Garnet being a fusion. He is extremely nonchalant and not very surprised at seeing Ruby and Sapphire. I think this pretty much cements that at one point we're going to see a flashback where Greg sees Ruby and Sapphire. They do not split up very often. I mean, Steven has never met them, or at least he has no memories of ever meeting them. So, for Greg to be this nonchalant and this unsurprised, there has to be a little bit of a backstory there, and I do hope we see it eventually. So the fight between Ruby and Sapphire is eventually settled by Steven getting angry and getting fed up. I think this is a bit weird. Steven is out of character in this moment, and I don't like the way it was handled. Steven gets angry, he smashes the plate and the food that he cares so dearly about, and marches out of the restaurant. And then he goes on to ask, is it me? Is this all happening because it's somehow my fault? First of all, he was angry at their trip that was supposed to be fun getting ruined. He was angry at Ruby and Sapphire fighting. So why all of a sudden is he really sad and blaming it on himself? That's a bit incongruous with the scene that just happened, in my opinion. But more so than that, Steven has matured a lot since the start of the series. There is no reason for Steven to suspect that this situation is his fault. And Steven easily should be able to understand what happened with Pearl and Garnet, and Steven knows how Garnet sees fusion as this incredibly personal, intimate, important thing. Steven should be able to analyze the situation around him without much hardship and know exactly where all this conflict is coming from. For him to say, I don't see why this is happening and blame it on himself, feels extremely out of character for the boy who has matured so much and is honestly one of the people who probably has the most common sense in the group at this point. And then everybody starts crying and having dialogue that explains their feelings and their mistakes really blatantly. I kind of wish it was a bit more subtle. Really, this scene wasn't doing it for me But as soon as Ruby calls Sapphire her Laffy Saffy, oh my goodness, it was just so cute and adorable and so mushy that like all my complaints melt away. And as the kisses and the snuggling starts and Steven is getting embarrassed, it's just like so cute and well executed that all my complaints with the out of character and the kind of lack of nuance in the writing, it all just melted away. And I love how basically we see this like smooching of what is essentially a homosexual couple. Yes, gems are genderless, but I mean, come on, who are we kidding? They identify as female, they use female pronouns, they pretty much have female forms. And Ruby, you could say, is a bit androgynous, so maybe that helped get past Cartoon Network's filters, because unfortunately cartoons are still really averse to showing homosexual relationships. But, like, come on, this is pretty much the best demonstration of public displays of affection from a homosexual couple we have ever had in a cartoon, and it was great. I loved it. It pretty much saved the entire exchange for me. So by the end of the episode, Garnet does not forgive Pearl, but she is taking steps to get there. She is now speaking to Pearl and not just coldly ignoring her. I think this is nice. It definitely takes more to fix this relationship than just Ruby and Sapphire no longer being angry at each other. It still will take time for Garnet to move on beyond what happened. And I love how Amethyst is basically an ear for Pearl. Pearl is explaining, all these various emotions she's probably having or how to resolve the situation, and Amethyst is listening to her, basically providing a shoulder for Pearl to vent, because Pearl is very, very upset at what she did. She's feeling very bad about it. And I think it's awesome that, again, we see more mature aspects from Amethyst. Amethyst clearly doesn't want to be there, and she clearly doesn't want to listen to any of this, but she does it for her friend anyway. So it may seem like I criticized this episode a lot, but I still liked it. I thought it was a good episode. It was a very pleasant watch, and there was a lot of fun, heartwarming moments in it. I just think a lot of times the writing kind of slipped, and it could have been a bit better. The whole conflict resolution, with Steven being the triggering point of it, it felt very ham-fisted, and Steven's actions felt out of character to me. It didn't feel like the Steven I know. I think with a bit more thought, a bit more time, this episode could have been revised to be great, and right now I would just call it good. Still, it is a solid continuation of Steven Bomb 3.